Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is far richer and deeper in the books than it is in the film adaptations. While the movies do capture the magical atmosphere overall, many important scenes were cut, some so significant that fans still question their absence. Books allow room for detail, character development, and secondary plot lines. In film, many of these elements were sacrificed for the sake of pacing. However, some scenes were so powerful and meaningful that removing them feels like a true loss. Today we'll explore 7 deleted scenes from the Harry Potter movies that could have changed how we see the story. And we'll start with one that often remains in the shadow. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Neville's parents. A tragedy hidden away. Neville Longbottom became a fan favourite, especially in the later films. But one of the most heartbreaking scenes that explains his courage never made it to the screen. In the books, Harry, Ron and Hermione visit Neville at St. Mungo's Hospital, where he's visiting his parents, Alice and Frank Longbottom, who were brutally tortured into madness by Death Eaters. This scene shows what Neville has endured, shaping his personality and making his hero's journey all the more touching. The films settled for mere hints, a pity. Number 2. Peter Pettigrew, a death that never happened. If you've only seen the films, you probably never understood what happened to Wormtail. In the books, Peter Pettigrew dies by the hand of the silver hand Voldemort gave him. In a moment of hesitation, when he shows Harry mercy, the hand strangles him, a poetic punishment for his betrayal. In the films, he's simply stunned in the Malfoy cellar. After that, silence. He vanishes from the plot as if he never existed. One of the strongest redemption arcs, erased completely. Number 3. The Weasley shop. Where did the money come from? If you only watched the movies, you might wonder, how did the Weasley twins open their own joke shop when their family could barely make ends meet? The answer lies in the books. Harry gave his entire Triwizard Tournament winnings, 1,000 galleons, to Fred and George. It was a gesture of friendship, trust, and belief in their talent. The scene takes less than a minute in the book, but for some reason it was left out of the films. A shame. It would have shown Harry's generosity and the twins' determination. Number 4. The Muggle Prime Minister. Magic in the real world. At the beginning of Half-Blood Prince, the book offers an intriguing scene. The Muggle Prime Minister meeting with Fudge and Kingsley. He learns about the magical world and the coming dangers. It gives the story a sense of global scale, showing that Voldemort's war affects more than just wizards. This could have been a brilliant opening scene for the film, especially with the growing darkness, but it was left out, and the Muggles remain on the sidelines even when their world is threatened too. Number 5. Remember My Last, Dumbledore's Fury. In Order of the Phoenix, there's a moment that changes how we see Aunt Petunia forever. When she threatens to kick Harry out, a letter from Dumbledore arrives. It reads itself aloud and ends with a chilling reminder. Remember my last, Petunia. It's a brief scene, but it explains a lot. Petunia knew more about magic than we thought. Her bond with Lily wasn't entirely severed. The film ignored this scene, even though it perfectly highlights the protective spell Dumbledore cast, and the complex family dynamic inside the Dursley household. Number 6. Peeves. The ghost we were robbed of. Almost everyone who's read the books remembers Peeves, the malevolent, yet wildly entertaining poltergeist. In the films, he's completely absent. Though Rick Mayall actually filmed scenes as Peeves, the footage was cut, and the character was erased from existence. It's a loss. He was part of what made Hogwarts feel alive, chaotic, humorous, unpredictable. His clashes with Filch, professors, and even Harry added richness. Without him, Hogwarts feels just a little emptier. Number 7. Ron and Quidditch, a forgotten victory. In the 5th film, Order of the Phoenix, the entire Quidditch subplot is removed, and with it we lose an essential milestone in Ron's growth. In the book, despite his nerves, Ron becomes the team's keeper and helps Gryffindor win the Quidditch Cup. It's more than a game, it's a triumph over self-doubt. A moment when Ron finally steps out of Harry's shadow. In the film? Nothing, and that's unfortunate. This scene could have offered a much deeper look into Ron's character arc. Number 8. The Dursleys' first glimpse of magic. Vernon Dursley prided himself on being normal. He wore a tie, drank tea, and scolded his son for asking questions. But on that strange Tuesday, everything began to unravel. People in cloaks whispered on street corners. A cat sat on Privet Drive reading a map. Owls flew in broad daylight. At work, Vernon overheard someone say the name Harry Potter and nearly dropped his cup. That night, when he told Petunia, she turned pale. "Do you think it's him?" she whispered. The wizarding world was waking up, and the Dursleys, like it or not, were standing on the edge. The book builds tension with humour and magic. Every odd thing makes the reader lean in closer. It sets the tone. Magic isn't far away. It's creeping into the cracks of the ordinary world. The film cuts all of this. We jump straight to Dumbledore, arriving with Hagrid and McGonagall. No awkward Vernon. No muttered fears. No sense that something big is coming, but that's how it should begin. With mystery. With the world shifting ever so slightly. That first chapter was a spark, and the movie dimmed it. Number 9, The Tragic House of Gaunt. Marvolo Gaunt slammed his fist on the table, spitting words in Parseltongue. In a rotting shack hidden in the woods, he screamed about bloodlines and Slytherin, waving a ring with the family crest as if it were a crown. His daughter, Merope, sat in silence, scared, invisible. His son, Morphin, hissed nonsense, flicking his wand at imaginary enemies. This was the house Tom Riddle came from. Not a grand manor, not a noble name, just decay, violence, and obsession. In Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore brings Harry into this memory for a reason, to show where evil begins. Merope Gaunt, a witch with no voice, no agency, and no love, would one day enchant a Muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. with a love potion. When the magic wore off, he left her. Broken and alone, she gave birth to a child in an orphanage and died. That child was Voldemort. This wasn't just backstory, it was the root. He was conceived under a spell, Dumbledore says. A loveless union. It matters, Harry. The Gaunts weren't just ancestors. They were prophecy. Every curse Voldemort cast began in that shack. The film skips it entirely. No shack, no ring, no hatred passed down like an heirloom. Instead, it jumps straight to the orphanage and a young Tom charming his way through a meeting with Mrs. Cole. It's clean, polished, detached. But Voldemort wasn't born from calm corridors and folded hands. He came from screams in the dark, from a family that worshipped blood over love. The books dared to show us that. The film chose not to. And something essential was lost. Number 10, the house elves joined the battle. Kreacher stood at the front of the charging elves, his tiny fist raised high, his voice fierce. Fight! Fight for my master, defender of house elves. Fight for Harry Potter! The kitchens had emptied. Dozens of elves, armed with knives and pans, rushed into battle. It was a moment of reckoning. For centuries they had served in silence. Now, under Kreacher's command, they chose to fight. Not because they were ordered to, but because someone had finally treated them with respect. That someone was Hermione, that someone was Harry. Hermione had planted the seed long before. Her Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, SPEW, had been mocked by everyone. Even Ron laughed, but she never stopped. She saw what others ignored, injustice beneath magic. Her kindness toward Kreacher had changed him. In Deathly Hallows he became more than a servant. He became a voice. "We is brave, house elves is," he shouted. That charge into the great hall was redemption for him and for all his kind. The films erased it all. SPEW was never mentioned again. Kreacher had a few scenes, none of them showing his transformation. The elves never fought. The kitchens stayed quiet. And with that silence, the message was lost. Magic wasn't just wands and duels, it was dignity, choice, and the power of compassion. The battle at Hogwarts wasn't only fought by heroes in cloaks, it was also fought by those no one ever saw, except in the books. Number 11, The Final Duel, A Moral Stand. Harry faced Voldemort in the Great Hall, not in shadows, not alone, but in front of everyone, friends, enemies, the dead and the living. His voice didn't tremble. He didn't raise his wand. He didn't attack. He spoke. "You're the one who killed Snape, but Snape was never yours. He was Dumbledore's." He walked in a slow circle. Voldemort followed him with cold eyes, but Harry kept talking. "The wand won't obey you, Tom."
"Because you were never its master. Every eye in the room was fixed on them. It wasn't a fight. It was a reckoning." Harry explained everything, how Draco disarmed Dumbledore, how Harry later disarmed Draco, how the Elder Wand's allegiance had shifted without anyone realizing it. Then he said something no one expected. "Try for some remorse, Riddle," he pleaded. "Be a man. Try for some remorse." Voldemort only sneered. But the offer had been made. Even in that final moment, Harry gave him a choice. That was the power Dumbledore had believed in. Not spells, not wands, mercy. In the film, they fought alone. Outside, their bodies soared through the air in a special effects spectacle. Voldemort's face cracked like glass. He disintegrated into ash. No explanation, no dialogue, no audience. The Elder Wand's loyalty was never discussed. The truth about Snape or Draco or the deeper meaning of Harry's victory, gone. The entire message of the final confrontation was lost beneath CGI and silence. The book gave us closure. The film gave us fireworks. In the book, Voldemort died a human death. His body thudded to the ground, lifeless, ordinary, no grandeur, just finality. That mattered, because it showed that even the darkest wizard could not escape mortality. In the book, Harry won with knowledge, courage, and heart. In the film, he won with a wand. The result was the same, but the meaning was not. Number 12. Fred's death, the family's grief. Fred Weasley had just laughed. That was the last thing he ever did.
He stood beside his brother Percy, mid-joke, in the middle of a raging war, and then came the explosion. In the book, it's not just a death, it's a moment that stops everything. Percy falls to the ground, sobbing beside Fred's body, refusing to move. "No, no, no, no," he cries. George arrives. He doesn't speak. He just stares at his twin, as if expecting him to get up and laugh again. The pain slices through the pages like a curse. Molly screams. Ron and Harry freeze. There is no battle anymore, just this one instant of unbearable loss. The Weasleys don't grieve quietly. They collapse, they break, and we feel it. George doesn't say a word, but it's the silence that hurts most, the silence of someone who has just lost half of himself. This is where the reader finally understands that even in victory there's a price, and the price is love. In the film, Fred is already dead. No context, no explosion. The camera pans over still bodies, and his is just one of them. Percy kneels silently. George says nothing, no cries, no breakdown, no one even whispers his name. The twins who lit up every room are separated forever, and the audience is robbed of the moment that made that unbearable. It's over before it begins. A blink, a cut, move on. By cutting that grief, the film erased more than a scene. It erased the heart of the Weasley family. Fred's death was never just about him. It was about George's silence, Molly's scream, Percy's shattered pride, Ron's numbness. It was about the war stealing joy, not just life. The books made us mourn. The film made us glance. and then look away. Number 13. The real love story of Lupin and Tonks. Remus Lupin was not the noble, calm professor we met in Prisoner of Azkaban. Not always. In Deathly Hallows, he cracks. Fear eats him from the inside. After Tonks tells him she's pregnant, he runs. He abandons her, disappears from the Order, and turns up at Grimmauld Place with a request that leaves Harry stunned. "Let me come with you," Lupin says. "Let me fight." But Harry isn't impressed. He sees it clearly. Lupin is running from fatherhood. What follows is one of the fiercest arguments in the entire series. Harry, shaking with fury, tells Lupin the truth no one else dares to say. "You're acting like a coward," he says. "You're trying to make me feel guilty. You made your choice. You married her." And then the blow. "Your child deserves better than you." The words cut deep. Lupin storms out, humiliated, but later he returns quietly, broken, but braver. He apologizes. He chooses to be a husband, a father, a man. That arc, the fall and the redemption, is powerful, and it's gone in the films. In the movies, Tonks and Lupin simply hold hands, maybe glance at each other. Their entire love story is crammed into a line from Kingsley. Tonks and Lupin have married. Their death is wordless. Their son is born off-screen. The scene where Lupin asks Harry to be godfather? Gone. And with that we lose one of the most human, vulnerable stories in the series, how a man full of self-loathing chooses love anyway. Tonks, too, is flattened. In the books, she fights for Lupin. She follows him into battle. She insists that their love matters even when he wants to disappear. Her Patronus changes form to a wolf because she loves him so much. It's a heartbreaking detail. In the film, she barely speaks, and when she dies, it's silent. No goodbyes, no explanation, just another body on the floor. But readers remember, because in the book, their story wasn't tragic because they died. It was powerful because they lived fully, imperfectly, stubbornly, and together. Number 14. Professor Trelawney's humiliation. Professor Trelawney stood trembling in the entrance hall of Hogwarts, clutching her shawl like a child holding onto a blanket. Her trunk lay at her feet, spilling out tea leaves and crystal balls. Students gathered silently, watching the spectacle unfold. Dolores Umbridge, in her pink cardigan and smug expression, had just dismissed her in front of everyone. "You are no longer required at this school," she had said coldly. Sybil didn't argue, she simply cried. The castle, her home, was pushing her out like a broken ornament. As Sybil began to shuffle away, her footsteps echoing against the stone floor, the crowd parted, and there, stepping into the scene like a storm, breaking through still air, was Albus Dumbledore. His face was calm, but his voice was firm. "You may not sack her from the castle," he told Umbridge. "You do not have that authority. I, as headmaster, have that power, and I refuse to banish her from her home." The words struck like lightning. The students stood taller. Even Trelawney stopped crying. Dumbledore didn't humiliate Umbridge. He didn't shout. He simply stood by a woman who had no one else. In the book, his exact words are unforgettable. "You have the power to remove teachers from their posts, but you do not have the authority to banish them from the grounds." It was a lesson in dignity, one that no spell could teach, a masterclass in protecting those too fragile to protect themselves. That moment reshaped how Harry saw power. The film barely touched it. There's a glimpse of Trelawney in distress. Dumbledore appears, says a line or two, and it's over. No confrontation, no stand, no moment where we see what kind of man Dumbledore truly is. In the book, it's one of the most emotional scenes in the Order of the Phoenix. In the film, it's a footnote. And with it, we lost the chance to feel the raw human cost of Umbridge's cruelty. Number 15. The Dark Secrets of Dumbledore's Past. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, a quiet bombshell explodes not with wand sparks or curses, but through the pages of a book. Hidden in the seemingly innocent setting of Bathilda Bagshot's house lies a moment of rare narrative power. Harry, while fleeing Death Eaters and searching for Horcruxes, discovers Rita Skeeter's unauthorized biography, The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. It is not just a tabloid exposé, it becomes a mirror that cracks Harry's entire worldview. This moment, almost entirely erased from the films, carries a depth that reshapes how we see the Great Wizard, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. And for the first time, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the Chosen One, begins to wonder if he has been manipulated. Rita's book is described as a scandalous piece of work, but in the context of the story, it serves as more than character assassination. It is a rare intrusion of adult ambiguity into the otherwise black-and-white moral universe Harry has grown up believing in. When Harry reads about Dumbledore's youthful friendship with Gellert Grindelwald, a dark wizard who would become one of history's greatest threats, the betrayal cuts deep, not just because of the association, but because Dumbledore had never spoken of it. The passage, "The young Albus was no stranger to ambition," burns in Harry's mind. It suggests that Dumbledore may have once dreamed of wizard domination, even at the cost of Muggle lives. This was no mere alliance of convenience, it was a shared dream. "For the greater good," as the book quotes their credo. The weight of this revelation shatters the pedestal upon which Dumbledore had stood in Harry's heart. For 7 books, Dumbledore has been the moral compass, the gentle yet powerful force guiding Harry through darkness. Suddenly the compass spins wildly. Harry questions whether Dumbledore had led him into a death trap knowingly, whether he had been groomed as a pawn. The films, for all their spectacle, chose to brush over this inner conflict, reducing Dumbledore's past to cryptic one-liners and abandoning the psychological turmoil that made the final novel so poignant. In doing so, they stripped away the very humanity that made Dumbledore real. Equally erased from the cinematic adaptation is the haunting tale of Ariana Dumbledore. In the book, we learn she was attacked by Muggle boys as a child, resulting in uncontrollable magic that likely rendered her an obscurial, though Rowling never uses that term explicitly. Her father was imprisoned for retaliating against her attackers, her mother died in an explosion of Ariana's unstable power, and Ariana herself was accidentally killed in a 3-way duel between her brothers and Grindelwald. "I was the one who should have died, not her," says Aberforth in a gut-wrenching confession. This tragedy shaped the rest of Dumbledore's life. It was the cross he bore in silence. The films mention Ariana only in passing, robbing us of the deep, soul-wrenching grief that explains Dumbledore's reluctance to power. In Skeeter's words, Ariana was a squib, hidden away to spare the family shame. But the truth, as always, is more complicated. The biographer's venom contrasts sharply with Aberforth's broken sincerity. For readers, this juxtaposition raises a question that Harry himself must confront. What version of a person do we choose to believe? The one shaped by scandalous headlines, or the one carved by the hands of grief and remorse? The books let us wrestle with this. The films don't give us the chance. This loss is not trivial, it is foundational. The story of Bathilda Bagshot's home is also stripped of its narrative weight in the movie. In the novel, her house is a place of decaying memory, rotting books and silent ghosts. The air itself feels cursed. Harry and Hermione do not simply walk into danger, they walk into history, into a room soaked with the past. There, Harry finds the life and lies on a dusty table, and his hands tremble as he turns the pages. It's not just a book, it's a weapon, one that cuts through trust more deeply than any blade. The movie replaces this literary revelation with a more visually dramatic, but emotionally hollow, snake attack. Rita Skeeter, for all her caricature and sensationalism, plays a crucial role in this psychological unraveling. She exposes not just secrets, but the idea that icons have shadows. Her book forces Harry to look at Dumbledore not as a saint, but as a man who had loved, lost, and failed. He dabbled in the dark arts, toyed with revolutionary ideals, the book claims. These were not idle gossip points. They were catalysts for moral awakening. They set Harry on a path where faith must be re-earned, not assumed. Omitting this from the films left Harry's journey flatter, less resonant. What makes this even more painful is the realization that Dumbledore wanted Harry to find these truths. He didn't tell them himself, not out of cowardice, but because he believed that understanding must come from within. Dumbledore's silence is an act of faith in Harry's ability to grapple with complexity. The films, in rushing past this moral quagmire, portray a Dumbledore who simply keeps secrets. The book shows us a man who invites understanding through painful revelation. That difference is enormous. The fallout from Rita Skeeter's book also deepens Harry's bond with Aberforth. In the novel, Aberforth is no longer just a grumpy bartender. He becomes a wounded soul who holds the keys to the final truths. When he confronts Harry with the real story of Ariana, it is not to destroy Dumbledore's image, but to complete it. Albus was never free, he says. He was always haunted. This insight shifts Harry's grief from betrayal to empathy. He begins to see Dumbledore not as a god, but as a man who bore unbearable guilt. This transformation is essential to Harry's final confrontation with Voldemort. He wins not just by wand, but by wisdom. Number 16, Percy Weasley's betrayal and redemption. Percy Weasley's story is one of the most emotionally layered subplots in the Harry Potter books, and yet it was entirely gutted in the films. The middle Weasley child, often remembered as pompous and overly ambitious, plays a far more tragic and complex role in the books than the movies ever allow. His rise in the ministry, his painful estrangement from his family, and the heartbreaking reconciliation just moments before one of the saga's most devastating deaths, none of it survived the script revisions. Viewers were left with only a shadow of the character, but in the books, Percy's arc is a tale of pride, consequences, and ultimately redemption. Percy begins as a rule-abiding prefect, head boy, and determined student. His ambitions are clear from the start. While the rest of the Weasley family shares a warm, if chaotic, bond, Percy seems slightly removed, focused more on appearances and authority than connection. His admiration for the Ministry of Magic borders on reverence. This is especially evident in Goblet of Fire, when he becomes assistant to Bartemius Crouch Sr., a position he flaunts proudly. He soaks in the prestige, blind to the disturbing clues surrounding Crouch's behavior. The moment serves as an early warning of Percy's weakness, his need to matter, to be respected, even at the cost of loyalty. When Order of the Phoenix opens, the wizarding world is in turmoil. Voldemort has returned, but the Ministry denies it. Instead of standing with Dumbledore, Harry, and his own family, Percy chooses a side. He accepts a promotion, junior assistant to the minister, and distances himself from the people who raised him. Percy has been promoted, Arthur Weasley tells Harry grimly. He's now junior assistant to Cornelius Fudge. He's quite pleased with himself. There's no celebration, only pain. Arthur sees through the promotion. It is bait, a reward for loyalty to the Ministry line. Percy has fallen for it completely. The rift becomes official when Percy sends back his Christmas jumper, a beloved symbol of family in the Weasley household. This quiet moment is one of the most devastating. Not a shouted declaration, but a returned gift. Molly is crushed. She clings to the hope that her son will come to his senses, that he cannot truly believe the Ministry's slander. But Percy does believe it, or wants to believe it. His pride and ambition have turned into isolation. When the family learns Percy has cut off all contact, even refusing to acknowledge them in public, their heartbreak becomes a constant undercurrent throughout the fifth book. Percy's betrayal is more than personal, it's ideological. The Ministry launches a smear campaign against Harry and Dumbledore, portraying them as liars or madmen. Percy becomes complicit in spreading misinformation. The Weasleys stand firmly with the truth. with the Order of the Phoenix. Percy chooses bureaucracy over blood. Fred and George, ever the loudest voices in the family, are furious. Their mockery of Percy becomes sharper, but beneath the jokes is real pain. They once shared a room with him. They watched him grow from an awkward older brother to a man they now barely recognize. One of the most poignant passages comes during the Christmas at Grimmauld Place in Order of the Phoenix. Molly is in tears, trying to set the table, while her children attempt to comfort her. Percy would never throw in his lot with the ministry if they were really corrupt, she says, through sobs, still holding on to her maternal hope. Her despair is not over the political climate, but over a mother's heartbreak. Percy has not just rejected their beliefs, he has rejected them. This family, poor but proud, has always stood for unity. Percy's defection is a wound that will not heal. The divide continues into Half-Blood Prince, where Percy's absence from family events is stark. He does not come home, he does not write. Even when his brother Bill is severely injured by Fenrir Greyback, Percy remains silent. The ministry continues its descent into darkness, now infiltrated by Death Eaters, and still Percy stays. Readers begin to wonder if he will ever return, or if he has been lost entirely to ambition. But then comes Deathly Hallows. As the final battle brews, Harry returns to Hogwarts and the Weasleys gather. So does Percy. Out of the smoke and ruin he reappears. It is George who sees him first, and in that moment all is suspended. Percy does not come with explanations or speeches. He comes with action. He throws himself into the fight. "Hello, Minister," he says to Pious Thickness, before stunning him. For Percy, this moment is not about clever words. It is about choosing the right side, finally. Then comes the moment that cements Percy's arc as one of the most emotional in the series. He turns to Fred. There is no time for a grand apology. There is only urgency, grief, and recognition. Percy fights beside Fred, shoulder to shoulder, brother to brother. Their rift is healed not with words, but with shared action, with the unspoken understanding that Percy has come home. And then the unthinkable happens, an explosion, a wall crumbles, and Fred falls. Rowling does not shield us from the pain. Fred's eyes stared without seeing, the ghost of his last laugh still etched upon his face. Percy drops to his knees, clutches Fred's body, and refuses to move. In that moment, all of Percy's pride, all his ambition, all his years of self-imposed exile shatter. He screams, he weeps, he stays by Fred's side while the world burns around him. There is no redemption greater and no punishment crueler. This scene in the book is a masterstroke of emotional narrative. Percy's return, brief though it is, completes his arc. The boy who once valued rules above love now holds his dead brother inconsolable. He has finally made the right choice, but too late to save the one who forgave him. It's tragic, raw, and unforgettable. Number 17, Christmas Gifts and Quiet Acts of Kindness. In the cold corridors of Hogwarts, where stone walls echo with the silence of winter, warmth does not come only from fireplaces. It is born in woolen stitches, handwritten notes, oddly wrapped boxes, and the smell of treacle tart on a snowy morning. Christmas in the Harry Potter books is not just a decorative pause between battles and prophecies. It is a quietly magical reminder of everything Harry was denied for 10 years. And in those holiday scenes, there's a softness, a gentle kindness that the films largely ignored, cutting away one of the most human parts of the story. The first Christmas Harry ever truly experiences, or even the one that sets the tone for every year after, is quiet, snowy, and filled with wonder. He wakes in the Gryffindor dormitory to find a small pile of gifts at the foot of his bed. One of them, soft and green, is a hand-knitted sweater from Molly Weasley with an H stitched on the front. It's more than wool. It's a mother's love, extended to a boy who has never known what that feels like. Harry had never in all his life had such a Christmas dinner, Rowling writes. That moment is never recreated in the films with the same intimacy. The sweater becomes a mere prop. if it appears at all, when in the book it is a symbol of acceptance into a new family. In the Chamber of Secrets, the warmth continues despite the dark undercurrent of danger. Harry again receives gifts that reflect personal attention, not grandeur, but care. Ron gives him a box of Bertie Bott's every flavour beans. Hermione sends him a homework planner with helpful advice written inside. These aren't grand gestures, they're thoughtful, human things, the kinds of gifts people exchange when they know each other's needs and quirks. But the film rushes past these details. The Christmas feast is a passing scene stripped of intimacy. Yet in the books, each gift is a statement. You are seen, you matter, you are one of us. Fred and George Weasley, the perennial pranksters, also never fail to leave their mark on Christmas. One year, they give Harry a large box of magical jokes from their collection. Not only is it a laugh, it's a sign of inclusion. They treat Harry like a younger brother, not just a guest. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Hagrid gives Harry a handmade wooden flute, crudely carved but deeply heartfelt. In return, Harry gives Ron a Chudley Cannon's hat, knowing his friend's obsession with the team. These moments reveal how love in the wizarding world is shown through small acts of thoughtfulness, objects that aren't expensive, but precious all the same. Perhaps the most touching of all comes in The Goblet of Fire. When Harry decides to give Dobby a present, it is not gold or grand gestures, it's socks, a pair of his own, wrapped and handed over with sincerity. And Dobby, in return, gives Harry his own mismatched pair, one with broomsticks, the other with snitches. It is silly and odd, but deeply genuine. "Dobby is free," he once shouted in joy, but in this exchange he is more than free, he is loved. This small moment is absent in the film, replaced with scenes of drama and tournament tension, but the socks are not a detour, they are the point. They show that Harry has learned to care for others in the same simple, beautiful way they cared for him. In Order of the Phoenix, when grief and fear weigh heavily on everyone at Grimmauld Place, Christmas still happens. Sirius tries to maintain a sense of normalcy, carving the turkey and joking with Harry. The mood is strained, but that's what makes the gifts matter more. Hermione gives Harry a homework planner again, this time with reminders like, "Don't leave it till later, you big second-rater," written inside. Ron gives Harry a model of a firebolt that actually flies. These aren't just things, they are connections, lines thrown across a sea of confusion to remind Harry that he is not alone. The films never capture this fragile warmth. The holidays disappear in favor of dark prophecies and shouting matches, and we lose the most human part of the struggle. Half-Blood Prince carries on the tradition of subtle, meaningful gifts. In the book, Harry receives a box of maggots and other odd sweets from Hagrid, a book on Quidditch from Ron, and, once again, Molly's sweater. There's something profoundly reassuring in the repetition of this gift. No matter what dark force threatens the wizarding world, Mrs. Weasley's sweater comes on schedule, its yarn woven with unwavering maternal affection. The film adaptation, however, skips over the holidays almost entirely. The emotional heartbeat of Hogwarts. The sense of family, created not by blood, but by care, is all but erased. Even when Christmas is overshadowed by darker events, the books insist on preserving these small acts of love. In The Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron and Hermione are on the run, Christmas is no longer a feast in the Great Hall. It's a cold, quiet night in the Forest of Dean. Hermione marks the day by conjuring a wreath and lighting a fire. There are no presents, no sweaters, no sweets. But there is care, and that alone is enough. It's a sharp contrast to the holidays of Hogwarts, but it proves that warmth doesn't depend on location. It depends on the people who choose to share it. Number 18, Ariana's portrait and Aberforth's help. Aberforth. Dumbledore stood in the shadows of his older brother's legend, not out of weakness, but out of choice. In Deathly Hallows, he does not chase the spotlight. He runs the Hog's Head, a dingy pub in Hogsmeade where goats roam and secrets are safer than patrons. But beneath the layers of bitterness and untamed beard hides a man who plays a critical role in the final chapters of the war against Voldemort. The films reduce him to a background character, barely more than a gruff voice and a dim-lit pub. Yet the book paints him in bolder strokes, revealing a brother who, unlike Albus, does not hide his grief, shame, or resentment. Aberforth may not have worn the robes of a headmaster, but he did something far greater. He opened the door to Hogwarts in its darkest hour, quite literally. The secret passage to Hogwarts does not appear by chance or through clever magical objects. It comes from a painting of Ariana Dumbledore, Aberforth's lost sister, who died tragically in a duel gone wrong. In the room above the Hog's Head, that portrait doesn't just hang, it lives. Ariana, painted in soft pastels, opens the door into another world. It is through her image that Neville Longbottom crawls, weary and wounded. It is through her that the trio returns to the only home they've ever known. The portrait does not simply move aside like the fat lady. It steps down. It walks to the back of the painted room. And in the painted distance there is a corridor. Through it comes a real boy, from fiction to flesh, from sorrow to salvation. It's magic, yes, but it's also memory. When Harry sees Aberforth for the first time in the pub, he mistakes him for Albus. The resemblance is uncanny, though the eyes are fiercer, the posture heavier. Aberforth confronts them not with warmth, but with harsh truths. My brother sacrificed many things, Mr. Potter, on his quest for power, including Ariana. His words cut deeper than any curse. He doesn't idolize Albus. He mourns him, resents him, forgives him all at once. This complexity never made it to the screen. In the film, the Hog's Head encounter is brief, stripped of its emotional weight, but in the book it is a reckoning. A younger brother laying bare the cost of his older brother's ambition. Aberforth's relationship with Ariana is the bleeding heart of his story. He loved her in the way only a brother can, desperately, protectively, and without condition. After their mother died, it was Aberforth who stayed behind to care for her, not Albus. It was Aberforth who objected when Gellert, Grindelwald and Albus planned their glorious future, too grand for Ariana to fit inside. And it was Aberforth who was there when it all went to ruin. He was there when the duel between the three of them ended in a flash of light, leaving Ariana lifeless on the floor. He never forgave either of them, not Grindelwald, not Albus, not even himself. The painting of Ariana in the Hog's Head is not just sentimental, it is redemptive. Through it, Aberforth continues to care for others. He sends food through the passage to the Room of Requirement. He helps the DA members, now turned outlaws, survive. He doesn't fight in the war for glory, he fights because he must, because once he failed to protect a girl, he won't fail again. The portrait, then, is both a portal and a promise, a reminder of loss and a channel for hope. The omission of this detail from the film is more than a missed Easter egg. It is the silencing of a quiet act of heroism. Neville's battered face appears first from the portrait's tunnel. He is not simply hiding in Hogwarts, he is leading the resistance. And it is Ariana who guides him. This is not just a tunnel, it is a resurrection. Every time someone crawls through, they are choosing hope. They are returning to fight. It is a moment soaked in symbolism, charged with emotional weight. To cut it from the film is to rob the story of one of its most moving metaphors, that the dead can still open doors for the living, that grief can be a bridge, not a grave. The Room of Requirement, on the other side of the portrait tunnel, becomes the last bastion of rebellion. It pulses with magic and humanity. It is alive with the sounds of students who refused to surrender. They sleep in corners. They train in silence. They eat what Aberforth sends. All of this is connected by the thread of Ariana's portrait. It is not just paint and canvas. It is a secret artery of war. and Aberforth is the beating heart that keeps it alive. Harry sees in Aberforth what he never saw in Albus: vulnerability. Aberforth does not cloak his pain in riddles or ideals. He speaks plainly, sometimes cruelly, but always honestly. He tells Harry the truth about the Dumbledore family, about their failures, their pride, their tragedy. He warns Harry not to die for his brother's grand plans. And yet, in the end, he helps. Not because of strategy, but because of love, because Ariana, even in death, still connects them. One of the most powerful lines in the book comes when Aberforth speaks of Ariana. She was never right again after what happened. She wouldn't use magic, but she couldn't stop it erupting out of her when she was frightened or angry. She couldn't control it. No one could. This is not just background information. It's a portrait of magical trauma. Ariana was not mad. She was broken by violence. She became a symbol of all that magic could not fix. And Aberforth, though unpolished and gruff, carried that understanding with a quiet dignity the films never conveyed. The tunnel through Ariana's portrait was not just a secret path. It was the last untouched piece of home. Students crawled through it not just to reach Hogwarts, but to reclaim it. Each time they emerged, it was a rebellion against tyranny, a return to something sacred. Without that passage, the story loses one of its most potent images, the idea that salvation can come from sorrow, that the forgotten can lead the way. Aberforth joins the battle not with fanfare, but with fire. He fights alongside the rest, side by side with his brother's allies, not out of loyalty to Albus, but because it is right. His pub, once a place of isolation, becomes the gateway to revolution. In the book, this transition is seamless, emotional, necessary. In the film, it barely exists. One moment he appears, the next he's gone. The audience never learns what he gave or why he gave it. The omission of Ariana's portrait in the film is not just a missing detail, it's the removal of a soul. That painting is a monument to grief, a symbol of how the past shapes the present. It is a passage between the world of the dead and the world of the fighting. Its magic is more than spatial, it is emotional, historical, sacred. And it is through that painting that the resistance begins. When Harry finally leaves Aberforth's pub, something has shifted. He no longer sees Albus as infallible. He sees the Dumbledores as human, as haunted, as hopeful. Aberforth does not seek forgiveness or recognition. He simply does what must be done. The painting remains, its soft eyes watching the storm unfold. She does not speak. She does not move often. But her presence shapes the tide of war. The films gave us spells and spectacle, but the book gave us something quieter, deeper. It gave us Aberforth Dumbledore, not just the bartender, but the brother, the guardian, the gatekeeper. It gave us Ariana, not just the victim, but the silent sentinel. It gave us a tunnel built on grief, carved through canvas and walked by warriors. And it told us again and again that even the smallest door can open into courage. Number 19, Fleur Delacour's loyalty and strength. In the shimmering spotlight of the Triwizard Tournament, Fleur Delacour entered the stage of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire with the elegance of a Vila and the presence of a mythical heroine. Yet to the average moviegoer, she might as well have been a passing breeze, a lovely face with a French accent and little else. The films robbed her of her spine, her loyalty, and her depth. What the movies erased was not merely a few lines or scenes, but a profound arc that revealed Fleur as one of the most quietly powerful characters in the series. In J.K. Rowling's novels, she is not just the token foreign contestant. She is a warrior in silk, a lover unshaken by wounds, and a woman who defies every lazy assumption made about her. The books take Fleur beyond the tournament and bring her into the very heart of the Weasley family, a world of mismatched socks, loud dinners, and deep bonds. When Bill Weasley, the adventurous, dragon-wrangling eldest son, is brutally attacked by the werewolf Fenrir Greyback during the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, it is not just his body that is scarred. His face is torn, his future in question. And in that moment, every eye turns to Fleur, the supposed beauty queen from Beauxbatons. The unspoken expectation is cruelly universal. She will walk away. Surely someone as exquisite as Fleur cannot bear the grotesque transformation of the man she intended to marry. But Fleur does not walk away. She stands her ground with a fury that stuns the room. She rejects the assumption that her love was rooted in appearance. In a now iconic moment, she tells Molly Weasley, who had begun to doubt her sincerity, "I am good-looking enough for both of us." There is no vanity in the statement, only defiance. It is a declaration of unwavering commitment, and it marks the precise moment when Molly's opinion of her future daughter-in-law begins to shift. For once, the matriarch sees Fleur not as a delicate ornament, but as a woman of strength. The strength that Fleur demonstrates is not loud, it is not wrapped in battle cries or heroics with a wand. It is quiet, composed, but unyielding. She chooses to stay by Bill's side not out of pity or obligation, but out of love that transcends the superficial. The films strip this away, reducing her to a wedding dress and a nervous smile. There is no trace of the woman who, in the books, nurses Bill with steadfast hands and joins the Order of the Phoenix without hesitation. Her wedding is attacked by Death Eaters, but Fleur remains composed. She does not flee or panic. She fights, flees only when necessary, and never abandons the cause. Fleur's bravery is made more remarkable by how easy it would have been for her to fit the stereotype others expected. She was, after all, part Veela, magical creatures whose power is their beauty. Her allure was seen as her weapon, her defining trait. But Rowling dismantles this image, showing that Fleur's most potent qualities are her loyalty, her honesty, and her refusal to conform. When others judge her, she holds her chin higher. She is proud, yes, but not selfish. She does not beg for affection from the Weasleys, nor does she change to please them. She demands to be accepted for who she is, and in doing so, earns their respect. In the film adaptations, Fleur is barely given a voice. Her role in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is reduced to background. She appears in the Deathly Hallows, yes, but even then she is a footnote in her own wedding. Viewers never learn why she stayed, what she endured, or what she meant to Bill during the darkest hours. They never see her helping the resistance, offering her home, Shell Cottage, as a safe haven for fugitives and refugees. They never understand that she risked everything to protect the people her husband loved. Shell Cottage, in the books, becomes a sacred space, a flickering candle in the night of Voldemort's reign. Dobby dies in her garden, Griphook heals under her roof, Harry recovers in her guest room, and Fleur, often overlooked, is the quiet guardian of this sanctuary. She provides warmth, food, and comfort to the broken warriors who pass through her door. She does not seek gratitude. She simply serves, protects, and loves. Her courage is maternal, fierce in a way that does not need to be flashy. The moment Fleur tends to Bill's wounds is not described with cinematic glamour in the books. It is raw and full of tension. Bill is unconscious, grotesque in his injuries. The room is heavy with fear. Tonks and Lupin are arguing. Molly is weeping. And through it all stands Fleur, whose love is not shaken. Her presence cuts through the prejudice like a blade. She does not deliver a speech. She delivers a promise. And in that moment the reader understands this is no delicate flower. This is iron beneath silk. It is especially telling that Ginny Weasley, the ever-skeptical younger sister, also revises her view of Fleur. In earlier chapters, Ginny mocked her as Phlegm, a petty nickname for a girl she found insufferable. But after Fleur's unwavering devotion to Bill, even Ginny is silenced. The Weasleys, once a wall of judgment, begin to crumble before the sheer sincerity of Fleur's heart. She earns her place in the family not by proving she can cook or clean or smile, but by proving that love is not dictated by appearance. Fleur's actions also stand in stark contrast to the behavior of many others during wartime. While some characters falter, some flee, some betray, Fleur remains true. She does not seek heroism, but finds it in the choices she makes daily. She is present for the escape from Malfoy Manor. She grieves for Dobby. She hosts Luna Lovegood, Dean Thomas, and Ollivander. These are not small favours. These are risks. Voldemort's reach is everywhere, and yet she continues to fight in her own way. Her relationship with Bill is one of the most genuine and underrated romances in the series. It is not built on drama or turmoil or adolescent confusion. It is tested through fire, literally. And it endures. Bill's scars are not just physical. He is a man marked by war, and Fleur loves him all the more for it. She sees in him a soul, not a face. This is a radical notion in a world where beauty is often equated with value, especially for women. Fleur flips this assumption on its head. Rowling uses Fleur to say something about prejudice, not just against outsiders, but against appearances. The Weasleys, for all their warmth, are not immune to snap judgments. They assume that because Fleur is beautiful, she must be shallow. Because she is foreign, she must be selfish. But Fleur proves that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers and still shakes the earth. Her love for Bill is a steady drumbeat through the chaos. It is not grand, but it is relentless. Even her role in the final battle of Hogwarts, though not shown in detail, is implied. She is there fighting, her family is there grieving and fighting. The war affects her as much as anyone. She is no longer a visitor. She is a part of the story, a part of the resistance, a woman who gave everything she had to a land that was not hers. And she did so not for glory, but for love, for loyalty, and for what was right. In the end, the omission of Fleur's story from the films is more than a missed opportunity. It is a silencing of one of the saga's most powerful messages, that beauty and strength are not mutually exclusive, and that true love does not falter in the face of ruin. Fleur Delacour in the books is not a background character. She is the steel in velvet, the lighthouse in the storm, and the heartbeat of a home called Shell Cottage. Her story deserved to be seen. Instead, it was left in the margins, waiting for those who cared enough to turn the page. Number 20, Harry's final speech in the Great Hall. When the dust finally settled in the Great Hall of Hogwarts and the echo of the final curse faded into silence, it wasn't just the end of a battle, it was the end of an era. And in J.K. Rowling's book, Harry didn't merely stand there victorious. He spoke, he explained. He offered clarity to a broken world, standing among the living and the dead to reveal what had truly happened in the heart of darkness. Yet in the film, all of this was stripped away. There was no explanation, no reflection, just a boy snapping a wand and walking into silence, leaving behind a hollow victory devoid of context. What was lost in this omission is one of the most meaningful and emotionally intelligent moments in the entire series, Harry's final speech, delivered not with grandeur, but with truth. In the book, Harry stands over Voldemort's corpse, a body now unremarkable, stripped of fear and grandeur. The man who called himself Lord Voldemort, who terrorized generations, lay lifeless, defeated not by brute power, but by a chain of sacrifices, courage, and a complete understanding of what he himself could never grasp. The survivors were stunned, their eyes shifting between the body of their enemy and the boy who lived. Harry steps forward, not to revel in triumph, but to illuminate the truth. You're the one who is weak, you'll never know love or friendship. And I feel sorry for you, he had once told Voldemort. And now he would show the world why that mattered. He tells them that Voldemort was never immortal, that the Dark Lord's search for everlasting life was doomed the moment he chose to split his soul. Horcruxes were his undoing. Harry explains that each one had been destroyed. Tom Riddle's diary in the Chamber of Secrets, the locket in the cave, the ring in the Gaunt shack, the cup in Bellatrix's vault, the diadem in the Room of Requirement, and even Harry himself unknowingly carrying a fragment of the Dark Lord's soul. Every piece was gone. The man who had wanted to conquer death had become its servant, dragging his shattered soul through shadows until it collapsed under its own weight. And then, Harry reveals the cruelest twist of all. Voldemort was killed by his own curse. In trying to use the Elder Wand, never loyal to him, he brought about his own destruction. Harry had learned this not through prophecy or power, but by listening, by observing, by understanding. He had pieced together the mystery of wand lore, recognizing that Draco Malfoy had unintentionally disarmed Dumbledore and thus won the allegiance of the Elder Wand. When Harry later disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor, the wand shifted allegiance once more to Harry. This was why Voldemort's curse backfired. It was not fate, it was not luck. It was a boy who paid attention and understood what the Dark Lord never would. That explanation in key unravelling of myth is absent in the films. It's not merely a missing speech, it's a missing soul. In the book, Harry stands as both warrior and witness. He doesn't simply destroy evil, he explains how. He shares the knowledge, making sure that those who survived understood that Voldemort's strength was always a facade, a mask worn by a terrified man who feared death more than anything. It was knowledge, not violence, that brought about the end of terror, a truth that becomes invisible when replaced by a broken wand tossed into the abyss. And then comes the moment of the Elder Wand. In the film, it's reduced to a silent gesture. Harry snaps the wand and drops it into a canyon, never once sharing his reasoning. It looks impulsive, even reckless, as if he's discarding a dangerous toy. But in the book, the act is one of conscious choice, a powerful rejection of power. Harry doesn't destroy the wand out of fear that he might become like Voldemort. He intends to return it to Dumbledore's tomb, hoping its power dies with him, if he dies a natural death. But if he lives on, the Elder Wand's allegiance will never pass, and its story will end with him. It's a poetic conclusion, rooted in humility and wisdom. This is the culmination of Harry's journey. He's not just the boy who lived, he's the boy who learned. He learned what Dumbledore meant about choices. He learned what Snape's life revealed about love. He learned what Voldemort never could, that power is not in domination, but in restraint. To erase this from the film is to erase the message. It paints Harry as reactive, when the book shows him as intentional. He knows what he's doing, he understands the danger of power without conscience, and he chooses not to wield it. When Harry walks into the Great Hall, where bodies of the fallen still lie, he is not a conqueror. He is a messenger. He offers no speeches of triumph, no vows of revenge. He speaks to Kingsley, McGonagall, and others, not as a leader, but as someone who has seen the full arc of the war. His explanations matter because they bring closure. They allow the broken world to begin to mend. He doesn't want the Elder Wand. He doesn't want to be the master of death. He wants to go home, to be with those he loves. That refusal is his victory. Even the symbolism is lost in the films. The wand snapped in half and thrown away is a visual without narrative. In the book, Harry's act is steeped in meaning. He physically repairs his own wand at the faithful Holly and Phoenix Feather wand broken in Malfoy Manor, using the Elder Wand before returning it. It's a restoration of his true self, a return to who he was before the war. This personal moment shows that he doesn't need the greatest wand. He only needs his own. He walks away whole, not because he won, but because he refused to be changed by hatred. By omitting this, the film robs the audience of Harry's final gift, understanding. The same boy who once wandered into Diagon Alley in awe, who faced trials far beyond his years, who watched people he loved die for a cause they barely understood. That boy became a man not through violence, but through knowledge. He did not kill Voldemort with rage, but with clarity. And after it was over, he gave that clarity to others. That is not just good storytelling, it is healing. The tragedy of Tom Riddle becomes more poignant when placed beside Harry's mercy. Harry could have boasted, he could have paraded the Elder Wand and declared himself invincible, but he does none of that. His choice to speak, to explain, is rooted in empathy. He wants others to understand why the war ended so they don't repeat the same mistakes. He wants to break the cycle, not just of violence, but of myth. The myth that Voldemort was undefeatable, the myth that power is strength, the myth that death must be feared. This decision reflects the very heart of the series. Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." And Harry's final choice, to walk away, to explain rather than destroy, to educate rather than intimidate, is the ultimate fulfillment of that lesson. The boy who grew up in a cupboard under the stairs ends his journey by choosing not to become a king, but to become a teacher. And the classroom is filled with those who survived. What the film shows instead is a quiet moment without words, without weight, no acknowledgement of what had been lost or what had been won. Just silence. And in that silence, something essential is missing. The message, the lesson, the truth, not just for the characters, but for the audience. It tells us nothing. It shows us that Voldemort is dead, but not why, and not how, and certainly not what it means. But in the book, Harry makes sure that everyone understands. He names the truth, he lifts the curtain, and then, only then, does he rest. There's a profound grace in giving the world an explanation after horror, in not leaving people to wonder, in respecting their need to know. Harry gives them that. He stands in the blood-stained hall and doesn't disappear into legend. He speaks. He honors those who died by making sure their sacrifice has meaning. That is heroism, not just fighting the battle, but helping others make sense of the aftermath. And that's the ending the film never gave us. It is not enough to defeat the villain. The story must tell us why he fell and what his fall means for the world left behind. Harry's speech did that. The film's silence did not. And so, what should have been a triumphant moment of wisdom and closure became a gesture without substance, a truth discarded like a snapped wand falling into the void. Number 21. Stan Shunpike, a victim of the system. In the swirling chaos of fear and misinformation that followed Voldemort's return, the wizarding world turned to the Ministry of Magic for guidance and reassurance. But what they received instead was a calculated illusion of control. One of the most haunting examples of this illusion, often overlooked due to its absence in the films, is the case of Stan Shunpike, the young conductor of the night bus. A minor character at first glance, Stan becomes a symbol of everything rotten in the core of the system. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, his wrongful imprisonment is not just a side note, it is a grim reflection of how the Ministry sacrifices innocent lives to protect its own narrative. And it is this injustice that awakens a fire in Harry Potter, a fire that marks the true beginning of his transformation into a leader. Stan was never a figure of menace. Readers first met him in The Prisoner of Azkaban, where he nervously bumbled through ticket fares and conversation, clearly more interested in impressing others than in any kind of ideology. With his spotty face and second-hand robes, Stan didn't resemble a Death Eater. He resembled a teenager who desperately wanted to seem important. When news broke that he had been arrested on suspicion of being a Death Eater, it was not shock that spread among readers, but disbelief. Stan? That awkward, chatty boy from the night bus? The accusation was absurd, and it was meant to be. Rowling didn't need to spell it out. Stan's arrest was a political performance, not justice. The Ministry of Magic, led by the increasingly desperate Rufus Scrimgeour, was under pressure to prove that it had a handle on the growing chaos. Voldemort's followers were attacking more openly, people were disappearing, fear was spreading, and in times of fear, governments often seek scapegoats. As Dumbledore warned repeatedly, truth and morality are often the first victims of political survival. When Scrimgeour had Stan thrown into Azkaban, it wasn't because there was any real evidence. It was because the Ministry needed a name, a face, and a headline to show that progress was being made. Stan was young, poor, and expendable. The injustice stung more because of how publicly it was accepted. When Harry learned about Stan's imprisonment, his reaction was immediate and furious. He did not shrug it off as unfortunate collateral. He recognized it for what it was: corruption. "He's just a stupid boy who wanted to sound like he knew something," Harry said. The Ministry, of course, painted Stan as dangerous, but Harry had grown past the point of blind trust. He saw through the theatre of fear, and that moment, more than any duel or prophecy, showed Harry's maturity. He was no longer the boy who simply obeyed authority. He was becoming a man who questioned it. In the books, Harry's confrontation with Scrimgeour is one of the most charged and revealing scenes. The new minister approaches Harry at the Burrow, hoping to gain his support. Scrimgeour, like Fudge before him, is more interested in optics than substance. He believes that if Harry aligns himself with the Ministry publicly, people will believe that the Ministry is still trustworthy. But Harry refuses. "I don't like your methods, Minister," he says coldly. And then he brings up Stan. He doesn't forget the boy on the bus. "You're making Stan Shunpike a scapegoat, just like you made Hagrid one last year." It was an explosive accusation, but it was the truth. Scrimgeour, faced with the collapse of control, resorted to the same cowardly tactics Fudge had used before him: smear campaigns, false arrests, and public distractions. By invoking Stan's name in that confrontation, Harry showed that he now understood the cost of political lies, and more than that, he was willing to speak up, even when it cost him his relationship with the wizarding government. It was a moment that proved he wasn't just Dumbledore's favourite student. He was his own person, with his own moral compass. Yet the films chose to omit all of this. In Half-Blood Prince, Stan's storyline vanished entirely. There is no mention of his arrest, no reaction from Harry, no confrontation with Scrimgeour. This deletion isn't just a trimming of secondary plot, it's a loss of thematic weight. Without Stan, Harry's moral evolution appears flatter. The viewer sees the hero growing in strength and courage, but not necessarily in conscience. And that is the heart of the story that Rowling wrote. For her, the battle against Voldemort wasn't just a fight of wands and spells, it was a battle for the soul of the world. That included truth, justice, and the protection of the innocent. Stan's fate, tragically, only grows darker. By the time we reach Deathly Hallows, he's mentioned again, but this time as one of the masked figures attacking Harry in the skies during the Seven Potters escape. It's a chilling twist. Whether Stan had truly been turned in Azkaban or merely placed under the Imperious Curse is left unclear. But what is clear is that the system failed him. He was thrown into the darkest prison in the wizarding world without trial, without real evidence, and without a voice. He was abandoned by the society he had tried to be a part of. And the boy who once guided witches and wizards to safety on the night bus returned as a tool of darkness. That arc is not just tragic, it's damning. What's more disturbing is how easily the Ministry's actions were accepted by the public. There was no outcry, no protest. The newspapers reported the arrest as fact. Stan Shunpike, a Death Eater. No one questioned it. And that is perhaps Rowling's most brutal commentary, that evil doesn't always roar in your face. Sometimes it smiles behind a desk and signs a warrant. Sometimes it wraps itself in laws and procedures. And sometimes good people look away because they're afraid to question authority. The Stan storyline also served as a mirror for Harry's own fears. He knew that if someone like Stan could be sacrificed for convenience, anyone could. It made his mission more personal. He was no longer just fighting Voldemort. He was fighting the entire system that allowed Voldemort to rise: complacency, cowardice, and bureaucratic indifference. The real danger wasn't just the Death Eaters hiding in the shadows, it was the silence of those in power who refused to confront the truth. This is why Harry eventually breaks into the Ministry, not just to retrieve a Horcrux, but to challenge a system that punishes the weak and shields the strong. His experience with Stan lit that fire. It reminded him that justice, if left in the hands of the corrupt, would always become a weapon. It's no coincidence that in the final battle, Harry does not fight for revenge or glory. He fights for the world to become better, for the Stans of the world to be protected, not discarded. In choosing to ignore Stan's story, the films missed an essential truth about Harry. He is not just brave, he's deeply compassionate. He sees injustice not as an abstract concept, but as a personal responsibility. When others look away, Harry looks closer. When others accept the official line, Harry questions it. This is what separates him from his enemies, not just the spells he can cast, but the values he refuses to compromise. The Ministry's decision to imprison Stan also serves as a reflection of how fear corrupts governance. When institutions prioritize appearance over truth, they lose the trust of the people. That's exactly what happened. By locking up a harmless boy, the Ministry thought it could buy itself time. Instead, it lost credibility, and it was that loss of credibility that allowed Voldemort to step into the vacuum of trust. Tyranny doesn't always begin with a dark wizard. Sometimes it begins with a lie no one dares to question. Stan Shunpike's arc is a warning. It reminds us that heroes are defined not just by the battles they fight, but by the people they choose to stand up for. And in that moment, when Harry raises his voice in defense of a forgotten bus conductor, he becomes something greater than the chosen one. He becomes a symbol of moral courage, the kind of courage that doesn't need a prophecy to act, only a conscience. There are many spells in the Harry Potter universe. Some are dazzling, some are deadly, but few are as powerful as the quiet decision to stand up for someone no one else will. That is the magic that saved Harry more times than any wand ever could, and that is the magic the films, in their haste, left behind. Number 22, Dumbledore's symbolic bequests. In the pages of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Albus Dumbledore's will holds more than just a legal transfer of possessions. It's a final act of love, guidance, and carefully layered meaning. To Harry, Ron, and Hermione, Dumbledore leaves 3 unassuming objects: a snitch, a deluminator, and a children's book. But these items, seemingly mundane or odd at first glance, are symbols and keys to deeper understanding. They do not just serve narrative convenience, they represent Dumbledore's enduring care, his insight into each of them, and a final attempt to guide them without being present. In the films, this entire subplot is rushed, presented without reflection or weight, robbing the story of a crucial emotional and philosophical layer. What the movies fail to capture is that these gifts are not just things. They are puzzles, lessons, and silent goodbyes. Ron's Deluminator is introduced early in the series, but it takes on a new meaning in the final book. Left to him by Dumbledore, the Deluminator appears to be a device for extinguishing and collecting light, a kind of magical flashlight. But what it truly becomes is a representation of Ron's internal journey and the faith Dumbledore had in his return. After abandoning Harry and Hermione in a moment of frustration and pain, Ron finds himself alone, consumed by regret. In the darkness of that moment, the Deluminator reveals its true purpose. Ron hears Hermione's voice emanating from the object, a whisper like a lifeline, and when he clicks it, the light doesn't just extinguish. It pulls him toward them through space, back to the tent where they are hiding. It was a ball of light, but it flew inside me. It went straight through my chest and came out of my mouth, he later explains. It is an act of redemption, a light in the literal and figurative darkness. Dumbledore knew Ron would need it, not just to find the others, but to find himself. It is a gift of hope, of trust, and of forgiveness in advance. The films, while acknowledging the Deluminator, strip it of its deeper symbolic resonance. It functions only as a tool, a convenient method for Ron to return. The scene omits the internal torment Ron experiences and the mystical quality of the object. There is no sense that the Deluminator responds not to magic, but to love and loyalty. In the book, the Deluminator feels like a sentient relic of Dumbledore's wisdom, his understanding that Ron, often in the shadow of others, would be the one who needed the most reassurance that he belonged. Hermione's gift is arguably the most overlooked in the adaptation. Dumbledore leaves her The Tales of Beedle the Bard, a book of wizarding fairy tales. At first, it seems like a charming but frivolous choice. Hermione herself is skeptical, wondering why the brilliant headmaster would consider nursery rhymes important. But as the trio's journey unfolds, the stories become central to understanding the mystery of the Deathly Hallows. The tale of the three brothers is not just a myth, it is the foundation of a legend that turns out to be real. You'll find the tale of the three brothers in there, Xenophilius Lovegood later says, guiding them toward what Dumbledore hoped they would discover. Peeves. The brilliance of this gift lies in its reflection of Hermione's arc. The most logical, book-driven, rule-following member of the trio is handed a book that requires belief in the irrational. These are stories with morals and mysteries, not equations and spells. Dumbledore trusted that Hermione, with her fierce intellect and deep loyalty, would not only decode the riddle but also evolve to understand that wisdom sometimes comes dressed in whimsy. The book, far more than just a manual, opens her to magic beyond the classroom, a reminder that not all knowledge is measurable. The films mention the book, but its importance fades quickly. There is no exploration of Hermione's changing perspective, no emphasis on how she clutches the stories and learns to read between the lines. What is lost is not just a subplot, it is a piece of her growth. Harry's inheritance is the most cryptic, the golden snitch he caught in his first ever Quidditch match. It arrives with a note, "I open at the close." For much of the story, it remains a mystery. It offers no guidance, no apparent use. Harry is left to wonder what Dumbledore intended. It is only near the very end, when Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest to meet Voldemort, ready to sacrifice himself, that he understands. As he accepts death, the snitch opens, revealing the Resurrection Stone, one of the three Deathly Hallows. In that moment, the symbolism becomes overwhelming. The snitch, once a symbol of sport and victory, becomes a container for death and memory. It only yields its contents when Harry is truly ready to die, when he has reached the spiritual close of his journey. Dumbledore gave him the final piece of the puzzle, but only when Harry reached the point of full acceptance could he unlock it. This detail is flattened in the films, where the snitch seems like just another hiding place. The emotional and philosophical tension, the idea that Harry must be willing to die, that the object only yields to sacrifice, is barely acknowledged. Dumbledore's hauntingly poetic line, "I open at the close," is present but unfulfilled. In the book, it is a revelation that binds together Dumbledore's plan, Harry's bravery, and the story's spiritual undertones. The film's treatment reduces it to a narrative shortcut. What should have been a culmination of Harry's journey becomes just a moment of utility. These three objects are not arbitrary, they are Dumbledore's final exam, his last test and blessing to the trio. To Ron, he gives light, the ability to find his way back, not just physically, but emotionally. To Hermione, he offers belief, an invitation to see beyond logic and embrace deeper truths. To Harry, he gives acceptance, the choice to die not in defeat, but in love. Dumbledore knew their flaws and strengths and chose accordingly. These gifts are not just clues, they are confessions of affection. They are how he says goodbye. The films include a brief scene where Rufus Scrimgeour delivers these items, but the scene lacks gravity. There is no lingering pause, no emphasis on how bizarre or emotional these gifts are. It is treated as a legal formality, not as a moment steeped in meaning. The books allow the mystery to unfold gradually, each item gaining significance as the characters grow into the roles Dumbledore saw for them. The movies, in contrast, treat them as quirky props, barely worth a second glance. What's more, these gifts are metaphors for the journey each character must undertake. Ron is the one who doubts and leaves. The Deluminator is his path home. Hermione is the one who seeks answers in facts, and Beedle the Bard is her first lesson in trust beyond the tangible. Harry is the one fated to die, and the Snitch is both a reward and a burden, marking the moment he accepts his mortality. Dumbledore, who spent a lifetime burdened by guilt and secrets, gives his students the very things they need not to repeat his mistakes. The omission of this rich layer from the films is more than an artistic oversight. It is a failure to honour the depth of Rowling's storytelling. The Hallows are not just objects, they are reflections of character. And Dumbledore's will is not just exposition, it is a narrative device packed with emotional resonance. Every item is a whisper of mentorship, a final thread of connection. One of the most powerful aspects of Dumbledore's legacy is that even in death he teaches. He knew that he could not solve the final mystery for them, but he could light the path. He didn't hand them answers. He handed them tools, personal, symbolic, and deeply tied to who they were. These were not just magical gadgets, they were mirrors showing the trio who they were and what they might become. To Ron, the Deluminator was a second chance. To Hermione, the book was an invitation to dream. To Harry, the Snitch was the key to his own soul. Each item is soaked in metaphor, wrapped in quiet love. They remind us that magic in Rowling's world is not about power, but about transformation, about courage, about the willingness to believe. By excluding these truths, the films miss an opportunity to elevate the story from a tale of survival to a meditation on sacrifice, trust, and grace. In the final pages of the book, when Harry holds the Snitch and whispers, "I am about to die," it is not a declaration of defeat, it is a declaration of understanding. That moment, earned through a journey of heartbreak and discovery, would never have been possible without Dumbledore's foresight. These gifts are the remnants of his wisdom, designed not to manipulate, but to prepare. And in that preparation lies the ultimate act of love. The will of Albus Dumbledore is not a simple list of objects, it is a riddle, a farewell, and a final lesson. In stripping these items of their depth, the films lose more than a subplot. They lose a piece of Dumbledore's heart. Number 23. Archie and the Skirt at the Quidditch Cup. At the height of the Quidditch World Cup festivities in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, amid the roar of magical fireworks and the hustle of international fans in enchanted tents, a quiet but poignant scene unfolds, one that never made it into the films. It was short, comical on the surface, yet held deep implications about the wizarding world's culture and values. An elderly wizard named Archie stands in open defiance of the Ministry of Magic's Muggle-worthy excuse committee, not through grand gestures or dangerous magic, but by choosing to wear a lacy, flowing nightdress instead of trousers. His explanation? "I like a healthy breeze round my privates. Thanks." He refuses to comply, and in that moment, Archie unknowingly challenges more than a dress code. He becomes a gentle symbol of magical tolerance, an echo of freedom that the films never let the audience hear. The absence of Archie's scene in the film adaptation is more than a snub to comic relief. It removes a small yet powerful lens into the wizarding world's attitude toward individuality and nonconformity. J.K. Rowling often used minor characters to communicate the world's moral complexity and richness. Archie, with his stubborn smile and billowing lace, does something no dramatic duel or ancient prophecy ever quite accomplishes. He shows how deeply the magical community values personal comfort and identity over blind obedience. In a world where Death Eaters march in black, Archie's soft cotton defiance is a charm against uniformity. The ministry official, trying to enforce a regulation requiring wizards to wear appropriate Muggle attire to avoid attracting attention, is clearly exasperated. Archie, meanwhile, is unfazed, oblivious, or perhaps simply indifferent to the rules. The moment is filled with tension between magical bureaucracy and personal expression. But it is Archie's calm and natural presence, his lack of embarrassment, that diffuses the entire situation. It's as if the very air around him is bewitched to ignore judgment. He's not protesting to make a point, he simply prefers it this way. There's a quiet beauty in that, and in its own way, it's magical. Quidditch World Cup chapters are among the most vibrant in the entire series. From the arrival of Irish and Bulgarian fans in Technicolor cloaks and mascots to Ludo Bagman's booming announcements, the Cup is a celebration of international wizarding culture. Yet Archie's brief moment grounds it all in a human truth. While others cheer Victor Crumb or set off green fireworks, he wanders about in his nightie, comfortable in his skin. His presence says magic isn't just in spells and enchantments, it's in the freedom to be yourself without fear. This notion of wizarding tolerance is often overlooked in the films, which tend to sharpen their focus on plot over world building. But Archie's inclusion in the book suggests that wizards, as a society, have less interest in conformity than Muggles. There is no mockery directed at him from his fellow magical folk. The ministry employee may sigh and protest, but he doesn't insult Archie. Other witches and wizards simply accept the man in the lace-trimmed gown as another part of the Quidditch spectacle, no different than the leprechauns or Veela. That quiet acceptance speaks volumes. When Harry, Ron and Hermione attend the Quidditch World Cup, they pass through a magical campsite filled with eccentric characters. There's a wizard trying to set up a fire without matches, another one cooking sausages over what looks like a wand-powered grill, and someone else with a tent that's far too luxurious to be believable. But none of them stand out quite like Archie. It's not just what he wears, it's the confidence with which he wears it. Rowling doesn't portray him as a joke. She presents him as part of the fabric of a society that values magical identity over societal norms. His nightdress is not just clothing, it's a quiet refusal to abandon his way of life for Muggle mimicry. In a story world often defined by its fight between good and evil, Archie represents something else, the right to exist in peace without changing to fit someone else's rules. This is particularly poignant in the fourth book, where the darker arc of Voldemort's return begins to take shape. The whimsical nature of the Quidditch Cup, its colours, noise, and joyful chaos, is a brief sanctuary before the storm. Archie's moment is part of that sanctuary. His refusal to compromise his comfort for appearance becomes, in hindsight, a precious reminder of what the wizarding world stands to lose. The Ministry of Magic, with all its rules and red tape, appears comically out of touch when interacting with wizards like Archie. The entire department, from Mr. Roberts being confounded by memory charms to Percy Weasley's obsession with regulation, is shown to be woefully unprepared for the unpredictable, free-spirited nature of its citizens. Archie's defiance is gentle but absolute. He will not be squeezed into someone else's vision of propriety, and his presence mocks the futility of enforcing normality in a world built on wonder. What makes the scene even more poignant is the fact that it's nestled among grand spectacles. In a chapter full of thunderous applause, magical fireworks, and international conflict, the quiet old man in a nightdress stands as a whisper of individuality. It reminds readers that while Quidditch may be a global sport and magic may shape the world, the true strength of the magical community lies in its acceptance of difference. It's a message that slips away in the cinematic version, lost in favor of darker plotlines and digital spectacle. By removing this scene, the films unintentionally flatten the cultural richness of the wizarding world. We're left with a stricter, less colourful version of magical society, one where everyone behaves and dresses according to expectations. But the books tell a different story. Wizards can wear what they like, live how they want, and be a little odd without fear. That's a powerful kind of freedom, especially when you consider how often the wizarding world is threatened by purist ideologies and dark lords. Archie's story also serves as a mirror for Muggle society. While the Ministry tries to enforce clothing rules to blend in with non-magical folk, it becomes clear that the magical world doesn't truly understand or value Muggle norms. They follow them only to the extent required and often humorously fail. Archie's refusal is more than resistance to pants, it's resistance to Muggle conformity itself. Wizards have their own culture, and Archie's nightdress is a small, humorous act of preservation. He protects not only his breeze, but the whimsical spirit of his world. In a way, Archie's presence at the Quidditch Cup can be read as a metaphor for magic itself, gentle, strange, unpredictable, and not always sensible. Just like magic, he doesn't follow the rules, he simply is. And perhaps that's why the moment resonates so deeply in the book. Among all the displays of magical power and international tension, it is the quiet, lace-trimmed act of nonconformity that lingers in memory, because in a world fighting for identity, Archie has already found his. When Voldemort rises at the end of the fourth book, the contrast becomes all the more bitter. The joy and colour of the Quidditch World Cup vanish into the shadows of graveyards and dark marks. In that context, Archie's nightdress becomes not just an eccentric joke, but a relic of freedom, a brief moment when wizards could be playful, odd, and unafraid. The films racing toward darkness never pause for that moment of levity and heart, and something important is lost. Even Hermione, often the champion of rules, likely would have found something admirable in Archie's stance. Her later campaign for elf rights showed she valued principle over tradition. Archie, in his way, does the same. He stands on the grassy hills of the Quidditch campsite, unbothered by the Ministry, untouched by fear, and unaware of how rare his kind of courage would soon become. He's the kind of wizard Dumbledore might have quietly admired, not for power, but for integrity. The books are filled with characters who resist in small, deeply personal ways. Luna Lovegood wears radish earrings, Hagrid lives on the margins. Neville finds courage slowly, and Archie walks through a crowd in a nightgown, reminding the reader that dignity isn't about appearances, it's about choice. He chooses his comfort, his identity, and his truth, and in doing so brings a little more magic to a world that sorely needs it. That choice, small as it seems, belongs in the story. Number 24, Harry's outburst at Dumbledore. In the dim office of Dumbledore, filled with strange instruments whirring quietly, and the Phoenix perched silently above, Harry Potter stood shaking with fury. It wasn't the kind of anger one could hide behind sarcasm or the cold bite of teenage cynicism. This was raw, unfiltered rage that had been building for months, a slow boil of isolation, confusion, and unbearable grief. In the pages of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, J.K. Rowling gave us one of the most emotionally powerful scenes in the entire series. Harry, exhausted by nightmares of Lord Voldemort, the constant fear of possession, the weight of a prophecy he didn't fully understand, and the crushing loneliness of being shut out, finally exploded, not at his enemies, but at the one man he had trusted the most, Albus Dumbledore. The boy who had stood up to dragons and Death Eaters broke down not in silence, but in screams of betrayal. The novel captures this moment with unrelenting intensity. Harry is not just angry, he is devastated. He slams his fists on tables, shouts at the top of his lungs, and demands answers that have been denied to him all year. "I don't care," he yells when Dumbledore finally tries to explain his silence. "You've kept me in the dark for a whole year." This is not a tantrum. This is the sound of a boy who has just lost his godfather, the last connection he had to his parents, and he cannot understand why everyone, especially Dumbledore, stood by in silence. The weight of this silence becomes unbearable. It is the silence that cost Sirius Black his life. This confrontation was not a moment of disrespect or disobedience. It was a moment of truth. For the first time, Harry was no longer a boy, blindly trusting the adults around him. He had been manipulated, ignored, and left to suffer without guidance, while carrying the most dangerous connection to the Dark Lord. In Dumbledore's effort to protect Harry by withholding information, he had unknowingly alienated the one person he sought to save. Harry's eruption was not just about Sirius. It was about the betrayal of trust, the fear of madness, and the terror of being used like a pawn on a chessboard he barely understood. It was the moment he stopped being a child. But in the film adaptation of Order of the Phoenix, this pivotal moment is erased. The entire build-up of Harry's inner turmoil is reduced to a series of silent stares and haunted glances. The scene in Dumbledore's office is muted both emotionally and literally. The viewer never hears Harry scream. They never see him destroy objects in his rage. They never witness his desperate demand for truth. The entire emotional storm that was carefully constructed over hundreds of pages is replaced with a quiet, almost stoic encounter. And with that silence, the story loses a fundamental layer of its humanity. This omission is not just a minor cinematic decision. It fundamentally alters Harry's character arc. In the book, this confrontation is the culmination of months of psychological strain. He has been tortured by dreams of corridors and locked doors, isolated from his friends all summer, and treated like a child by the very adults who expect him to face the greatest evil the wizarding world has ever known. Dumbledore's deliberate avoidance of Harry throughout the year, refusing to meet his eyes, cutting short conversations, delegating communication to others, creates a rift that Harry doesn't understand until it's too late. That emotional damage needed to erupt. When it does, it becomes a rite of passage. This is the very moment when Harry steps into emotional adulthood. For the first time, he claims ownership over his feelings. He no longer tolerates secrets. He no longer accepts being treated as fragile or incapable. The anger he hurls at Dumbledore is not just a cry for help, it is a demand for autonomy. When he says, "I'm sick of it, I'm sick of being kept in the dark and fed lies," it is the first time he dares to accuse Dumbledore of failure. And Dumbledore accepts this. He listens, he admits his mistake. That mutual reckoning is vital to their relationship and to the larger narrative of Harry's journey toward self-reliance. By removing this scene, the film adaptation not only dulls the emotional climax of the book, it also weakens the theme of truth versus protection. Dumbledore's flaw, his tendency to protect by withholding information, goes largely unexamined in the movie. The moral ambiguity of a man who claims to love Harry while isolating him at his most vulnerable disappears. In the book, Dumbledore's confession is devastating. "I cared about you too much. I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth." This is not a triumphant line, it's a tragic one. It reveals the failure of even the greatest wizard to protect a child from pain without causing greater harm. There is also something deeply cathartic about reading Harry's rage. It validates the reader's own sense of injustice. Many fans grew up alongside Harry. They too felt the confusion of adolescence, the agony of loss, and the growing awareness that adults can be wrong. To witness Harry scream and break down is to witness someone finally say what we've all wanted to say when the world seemed unfair. It teaches that anger is not weakness, it is a necessary reaction to betrayal and pain. Without this scene, Harry becomes too passive, too quiet, too forgiving. He loses his emotional complexity. In the book, even the magical surroundings react to Harry's anger. The silver instruments in Dumbledore's office shatter, the portraits on the wall mutter in alarm. Fawkes, the phoenix, lets out a low, sorrowful cry. The entire room becomes a reflection of Harry's inner chaos. This is not a boy who is misbehaving. This is a boy whose soul is breaking. The cinematic version robs us of that immersion. It gives us a quiet Harry nodding solemnly instead of the boy who has every reason to scream at the top of his lungs. What makes this even more frustrating is that the fifth book is Harry Potter's most internal volume. Much of the story is told through Harry's emotions, his jealousy, his guilt, his hope, and his fury. To mute those emotions on screen is to silence the very voice that carries the story. The The Harry of the film never reaches the emotional depth of the boy in the book because his most human moment is edited out. We don't see the storm inside him. We only see its aftermath. The consequences of this silence ripple through the rest of the film series. Without that confrontation, Dumbledore's eventual death in the 6th film lacks the same emotional closure. The reconciliation between Harry and Dumbledore feels unearned because we never saw the fracture. There is no healing without a wound, and in the book that wound bleeds openly. Harry's scream is the sound of betrayal, yes, but also the beginning of forgiveness. Sirius's death is arguably one of the most traumatic moments in Harry's life. But it's not just the loss that shatters him, it's the fact that it might have been prevented. If Dumbledore had told him more, if the adults had trusted him more, if someone had believed in his strength rather than shielding him with silence, maybe Sirius would still be alive. That thought haunts Harry, and in the book, he doesn't keep that thought inside. He throws it in Dumbledore's face, trembling with the unbearable truth that adults failed him. This level of emotional honesty is rare in young adult fiction, and Rowling did not shy away from it. She gave her protagonist the full range of human feeling: love, rage, grief, hope. It is precisely this courage that makes Harry Potter a lasting literary icon. He is not strong because he's invulnerable. He is strong because he dares to feel deeply and speak those feelings even when they're inconvenient, even when they hurt. The film chose to present him as composed, solemn, and brooding, but the real Harry? He was loud, he was furious, and he was right. In that scene in the book, Dumbledore is finally forced to look at Harry, really look at him, and see not a child, but a person shaped by pain. That's the moment their relationship changes forever. Harry's scream is not just about grief. It is a demand for recognition, for truth, for dignity. And while the book grants him that moment, the film sadly does not. Number 25, the story of Regulus, Black, and Kreacher. Regulus Arcturus Black, once nothing more than a name on a dusty family tapestry, was in truth the boy who first struck Voldemort where it hurt the most. The younger brother of Sirius, Regulus, was born into the dark, ancient black family where purity of blood was valued above morality. But unlike Sirius, who rebelled loudly and stormed out, Regulus obeyed the family doctrine at first. He even joined the Death Eaters. Yet the films merely hint at his existence and omit his redemption entirely. The books, however, deliver a quietly tragic story of a boy who recognized horror and sacrificed himself in silence. His tale deserved far more than the crumbs it was given in the movies. When Dumbledore shows Harry the locket Horcrux in Half-Blood Prince, the audience assumes this is a task no one has dared attempt before. But in Deathly Hallows, the truth unravels. Kreacher, the Black family's old and often mocked house elf, tells a story that changes everything. He recalls the day Regulus gave him a command to accompany him to a cave by the sea, one filled with dark magic, where Voldemort had hidden a piece of his soul. Regulus, once a boy who thought the Dark Lord was the answer to purity and power, had begun to understand Voldemort's true nature, the casual cruelty, the exploitation of lesser beings, the unnatural pursuit of immortality at any cost. It was not a grand rebellion, not a moment of glory. Regulus did not gather allies or announce his intentions. He quietly ordered Kreacher to watch and obey. They sailed across the eerie black lake toward the island where Voldemort had concealed a locket filled with a part of his soul. As part of Voldemort's defenses, a drink, thick and poisoned, must be consumed to reach the locket. Voldemort had designed it so that whoever drank it would suffer immensely and be unable to escape. But house elves, Voldemort had forgotten, operate under different laws. Kreacher drank the potion first, on Voldemort's command months before, and Voldemort left him to die, but Kreacher did not die. When Voldemort left, the elf vanished using elf magic, returning home to the Black House. Regulus had noticed. He had questions. He had answers. And when the puzzle fit together, he chose to act. He made Kreacher take him back. He ordered the elf to force him to drink the poison, take the real locket, and leave him there. As Kreacher told it, through choking sobs and trembling hands, Master Regulus said to come back without him. It was one of the most emotional scenes in the series. The significance was layered. Regulus had not merely died. He had died knowing what the locket was, a Horcrux, a part of Voldemort's soul, and he died ensuring it was no longer hidden. This action was the first real blow against Voldemort's immortality. Years before Dumbledore and Harry had begun their hunt, a teenage boy had already cracked the first layer of Voldemort's protection. In sacrificing himself, Regulus offered a rare act of quiet heroism. He defied the most powerful dark wizard of the age, not with wands or battles, but with insight, humility, and trust in a creature the wizarding world had always dismissed. The tragedy is not just in Regulus's death, it's in how the films chose to leave it all out. No scene of the cave, no shot of the Black Lake, no Kreacher collapsing in grief. In the movies, we get a brief mention that a RAB took the real locket. The full emotional force, the transformation of Kreacher, and the humanity of a boy raised in a house of monsters, all of it vanished into the cutting room floor. But Rowling didn't forget. She made sure that when Harry learns of Regulus's sacrifice, he does not merely pity Kreacher. He listens, he shows compassion, and that is what changes the elf. Kreacher, once bitter and slinking in the shadows, becomes loyal. He brings them the real locket. He helps clean Grimmauld Place. He makes stew. And when the final battle erupts at Hogwarts, it is Kreacher who leads the house elves into the fight, wielding kitchen knives and bellowing, "For Master Regulus!" This wasn't just comic relief, it was the culmination of a long arc, born from a single act of kindness and recognition. The films erased that transformation. In the cinematic version, Kreacher's loyalty flickers in a single scene, then disappears. His hatred and slurs are trimmed, his redemption diluted. Without the story of Regulus, the heart of his loyalty is gone. Audiences never get to witness the deep change in Kreacher, not just from serving a new master, but from having his pain acknowledged. Without that, Kreacher remains an odd, shriveled side character, not the warrior he became in the books. Even the symbolism of the locket loses power without Regulus's backstory. The locket isn't just a Horcrux. It is a physical reminder of the cost of resistance. Harry wears it around his neck, burdened not only by dark magic, but by the legacy of those who tried before him. When they finally destroy it, it's not just a victory over Voldemort, it's a continuation of a battle started by a young man who no one thought mattered. Regulus becomes a thread in the grand tapestry of resistance, woven quietly but meaningfully. The reader feels it, the viewer never truly does. There is a quote in Deathly Hallows that captures it all. "He was a Death Eater," Kreacher whispered, "but he never hurt me. He was kinder to me than any of them, and he gave me an order I could not disobey." For once, the master-slave dynamic was used not for cruelty but for love. Regulus, who had grown up watching his parents treat Kreacher as an object, gave him a choice, and trusted him. That moment rewrote everything Kreacher thought he knew about humans. It laid the foundation for his loyalty to Harry, not out of obligation, but out of respect. This story, if given proper screen time, could have been a mini-film within the saga, a haunting, powerful sequence of regret, redemption, and sacrifice. Visually, it could have been one of the most haunting scenes in the series, the shimmering black lake, Regulus's pale face as he drinks the poison, the inferi rising from the water as Kreacher screams. Instead, we are left with a puzzle missing its crucial piece. We are shown the Horcrux, but not the hand that first took it. We see the elf, but not the love that changed him. The story of Regulus is a rare thread of subtle complexity in the Potter universe. It questions loyalty. It explores the idea that true rebellion can come quietly without grand speeches or explosive battles. It reminds us that not all heroes seek the spotlight. That message, powerful and deeply needed, is silenced in the films. And in doing so, something vital is lost. Had the audience witnessed Regulus's full arc, perhaps Kreacher would not be seen as merely a source of tension or amusement. He would be viewed as what he became, a creature capable of profound loyalty, changed by love and grief. Regulus's death is not just a plot device, it is the quiet origin of a chain of events that leads to Voldemort's ultimate downfall. Stripping it from the film strips us of understanding how deep that chain runs. To ignore this part of the narrative is to ignore the possibility of redemption, even from within the enemy's ranks. Regulus was not a saint, but he recognized the monster he served and tried to undo the damage. That lesson, that it's never too late to change sides, never too late to do the right thing, even if it costs you everything, deserved its moment. The book gave him that. The films did not. And for that they missed one of the most human stories in the wizarding world. Number 26, Gryffindor versus Hufflepuff, Quidditch match. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, one moment from the book that disappears entirely in the movie adaptation is the unforgettable Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, a match that quietly introduced fans to the athletic rivalry between Harry Potter and Cedric Diggory, while the films chose to highlight their interaction only in the context of the Triwizard Tournament. The truth is their first direct competition occurred far earlier, under dramatically different circumstances. This overlooked scene is more than a sports match. It's a moment that captures the emotional texture of Harry's struggle with fear, trauma, and growth, far removed from the grand duels with Voldemort, but equally vital in shaping who he becomes. The weather that day was miserable. Rain pounded the stadium like a curse, reducing visibility and soaking players to the bone. Gryffindor, already nervous about the match, found themselves at a disadvantage almost immediately when Oliver Wood revealed that their star seeker, Harry, would be chasing the snitch against none other than Cedric Diggory. Cedric was described in the book as a tall and good-looking sixth year, and what made the situation worse was that, unlike Draco Malfoy, Cedric was both talented and fair. There would be no underhanded tricks, just skill, discipline, and clean competition. That made him far more dangerous. The match opened with blinding rain, and Madam Hooch's whistle was nearly drowned by thunder. Fred and George Weasley struggled to keep up with the bludgers, and Katie Bell nearly dropped her quaffle due to the slippery conditions. Up above, Harry was a blur of scarlet in the grey sky, scanning for the snitch while also trying to stay upright on his bucking Nimbus 2000. Below him, Cedric moved with a composed elegance that made his yellow Hufflepuff robes stand out like a flicker of candlelight in the storm. This was not an easy match, nor was it meant to be. It was a test of nerves, skill, and the ability to remain calm when the world around you descends into chaos. Then came the moment that defined the game, and which should have earned a place in the cinematic telling of Harry's journey. A sudden drop in air pressure swept over the pitch. The crowd's screams faltered. A coldness rolled in, unexplainable, paralyzing, like the breath of death itself. And then they appeared. From the edges of the stadium, cloaked figures glided in, dozens of them, their skeletal hands clutching the edge of the sky. Dementors. Harry's world cracked. His fingers stiffened around his broomstick. The roar of the storm was swallowed by a high-pitched scream, familiar and haunting, echoing in his skull. "Not Harry! Not Harry! Please, not Harry!" The voice, his mother's voice, shattered his consciousness. The rain vanished from his senses. The crowd, the players, the match, gone. There was only the scream and the plunging sensation as his broomstick buckled. The world turned upside down as Harry plummeted 50 feet toward the earth, unconscious before he hit the ground. This was no ordinary fall. Harry's broom, his trusted Nimbus 2000, was shattered into pieces upon impact with the Whomping Willow. In the hospital wing later, Dumbledore's voice would reveal the shocking truth: not real Dementors, but Slytherin students dressed in black cloaks, mocking Harry's past traumas for the sake of a cheap scare. Draco Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle were responsible, yet for Harry the damage had already been done. The memory was not undone simply because the threat was fake. His collapse in mid-air revealed something deeper and more painful than a physical injury. In the books, this match served as the first time readers witnessed just how profoundly the Dementors affected Harry compared to other students. It was not just about losing a Quidditch match or a broken broomstick. It was the fragility of a boy who had seen death too young, who carried his mother's last words like a phantom inside his chest. Rowling wrote, "He was drowning in cold. He could hear the screaming growing louder and louder. It was all around him." That scream didn't come from the sky. It came from Harry's soul. Cedric caught the snitch. Hufflepuff won the match, but Cedric, in a moment of humility and integrity, tried to forfeit the victory when he learned that Harry had been attacked. He insisted it wasn't a fair win. That moment between competitors, one broken by invisible wounds, the other standing with grace, was a portrait of moral courage. Cedric Diggory was never a background character in the books. He was the embodiment of Hufflepuff values: fairness, loyalty, decency. His introduction on the Quidditch field was crucial in establishing that long before the Triwizard Tournament asked readers to mourn his loss. Harry, meanwhile, lay in the hospital wing not only physically shaken, but emotionally unmoored. He had always feared Dementors, but now, for the first time, he understood the cost of their presence, not just what they did to him, but what they revealed. He was weaker in ways that others couldn't see. The trauma didn't wear a scar. It echoed in moments of silence, in screams only he could hear, in the shivering cold of a stormy sky. Madame Pomfrey could mend bones, but not memories. This Quidditch match, though seemingly minor in the arc of the Goblet of Fire, was a moment of psychological confrontation. It asked Harry to reckon with the demons Voldemort had left behind long before the Dark Lord's return. In the hospital bed, Harry received no prophecy, no vision, no clue about the Triwizard Tournament, but he did receive something arguably more important: an understanding of his own vulnerability, and through that, a glimpse of his strength. The films bypassed this scene entirely. There was no soaring stadium, no tension between Gryffindor and Hufflepuff, no encounter between two seekers whose lives would later intertwine in tragedy. The omission meant losing not just action, but growth. The audience never saw Harry fall from the sky before he ever fell into the maze. They never saw Cedric's sense of honor shine before his name emerged from the goblet. Their connection was flattened, limited to the awkward formalities of the tournament, when in truth their story began in wind and rain, in fear and dignity. When fans look back at the books, they often recall Voldemort's resurrection or the graveyard duel. But the truth is, this quiet match, this invisible scene, carried just as much weight. Harry's resilience was not born in the final duel. It was built in smaller moments like this one, where terror took him unprepared, and still he rose again. As Dumbledore once said, it is our choices that show what we truly are. Harry chose to return to the field after that fall. He chose to face the Dementors in his dreams, to learn the Patronus charm, to confront what no child should have to face. And Cedric chose kindness, fairness, and humility, even when victory was handed to him. The movie adaptation gave us the maze, the dragons, and the Yule Ball, but it didn't give us this: the collision of fear and character, the personal battle fought in a stadium drenched in rain. The missing match is more than a deleted scene, it's a deleted layer of humanity. It stripped from the viewers a vision of Harry not as the boy who lived, but as the boy who fell, and the boy who stood up again, bruised but not broken. For readers who experienced that chapter in the book, The fall from the broom is not easily forgotten. It stays with them just as it stayed with Harry. It marks a moment when trauma interrupted joy, when a game became a battlefield of the mind. And it taught us something profound, that courage is not just defying Voldemort. Sometimes it's just getting back on the broom after the sky has swallowed you whole. Cedric's quiet integrity, Harry's trembling vulnerability, the cruelty of Slytherin's prank, and the bitter wind of that storm, these are all ingredients of a scene that deserved to be immortalized on screen. It was a story within a story, a duel without wands, and a fall that carried more meaning than a dozen scripted speeches. It was a test of who they were becoming, teenagers shaped by fear, kindness, and the unpredictable gravity of growing up in a magical world where even the sky could betray you. Had the filmmakers preserved this match, they might have given audiences a better understanding of why Harry grieved Cedric so deeply, why their bond was more than just forced companionship in a deadly tournament. It began with competition, it ended in camaraderie, and in between it held a lesson that only the sky could teach, that even heroes fall, but the brave always rise. Number 27, The Ghosts of Hogwarts and the Fat Lady. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, a chilling scene unfolds after Sirius Black infiltrates Hogwarts for the first time. The Fat Lady, guardian of the Gryffindor common room, is found missing from her portrait. Torn canvas hangs in tatters. It's Peeves, the poltergeist, who reveals the truth. Sirius tried to force his way in, and the Fat Lady refused to let him pass. She fled her frame in terror and refused to return, forcing Gryffindor students to sleep in the Great Hall under guard. This moment is heavy with tension in the book. It disrupts the rhythm of school life, sends a message that even the enchanted protections of Hogwarts are vulnerable, and more than that, it humanizes the painting. The Fat Lady is not just oil and brush strokes. She feels fear, takes action, makes a stand. In the films, this entire sequence is truncated to the point of irrelevance. The portrait is damaged, yes, but the emotional resonance, her refusal, her hiding, these are erased. She's reduced to a punchline, a missed opportunity to deepen the magical realism of Hogwarts. The Fat Lady isn't just a plot device. She is a fixture of Gryffindor culture. She sings badly. She fusses about passwords. She gets offended when students are rude. Her absence isn't just a hole in a wall. It is a rupture in daily comfort. When she goes missing, Gryffindors are homeless in their own castle. In the book, her fear echoes the fear of the school. Even the paintings tremble. It's through her disappearance that we understand how dangerous Sirius seems to everyone, even to enchanted guardians. In contrast, the film barely allows her to be more than a fleeting image. There is no time given to feel her dread, no emphasis on her choice to flee. Her humanity is discarded, and with it the opportunity for the audience to believe in a world where even paintings have courage or fear. Beyond the Fat Lady, the ghosts of Hogwarts suffer a similar fate. In the books, they are richly developed, deeply woven into the daily life of the castle. Nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor house ghost, isn't just a floating gag. He is a melancholy character who embodies the fear of death itself. In Chamber of Secrets, after his Death Day party, Nick explains to Harry what it means to be a ghost. "I was afraid of death," he admits. "I chose to remain behind. I sometimes wonder whether I oughtn't to have. Well, that is neither here nor there. In fact, I am neither here nor there." These words carry a weight that's nearly philosophical. Ghosts are not just leftovers. They are beings frozen in regret, too scared to move on. It's a subtle meditation on mortality, courage, and the unknown. Yet in the films, Nick is reduced to comic relief. The haunting depth of his unfulfilled existence never makes it to the screen. Nick's story is not just about himself. It is part of a broader pattern in the books. Hogwarts is full of echoes. Ghosts are those echoes made visible. They speak to unfinished business. to the lingering ties that bind people to a place or time. The Bloody Baron, for instance, is a terrifying figure in the eyes of most students. But in truth, he is a ghost steeped in tragedy. It's revealed in Deathly Hallows that he murdered Helena Ravenclaw, the Grey Lady, in a fit of rage, and then killed himself in remorse. He haunts the castle not because he enjoys it, but because he cannot leave what he did behind. This is not in the films at all. The entire emotional complexity of the Baron is dismissed. Instead, he is shown as a grim spectre floating in silence, a background prop without a voice. Peeves, too, is omitted entirely from the films. And though Peeves is not a ghost in the strict sense, he's a poltergeist, his presence in the books is essential to the texture of Hogwarts. He is chaos, rebellion, and mischief embodied. Peeves answers to no one except the Bloody Baron. He represents the school's memory of past trouble, of layered magic, and enduring personalities. Without him, Hogwarts is a little too clean, a little too tame. The absence of Peeves is more than an editorial decision. It robs the school of its messy, unpredictable soul. The Death Day party is one of the clearest examples of this narrative erasure. In Chamber of Secrets, Nick invites Harry, Ron, and Hermione to his 500th death day. They descend into the dungeons to find a cold, gloomy celebration attended by dozens of ghosts. Transparent figures drift through food that smells rotten, a ghost band plays off-key waltzes, and moaning Myrtle whines in a corner. The party is bizarre, eerie, and hilarious. It's also sad. Nick is clearly proud, but also desperate for approval. He tries to impress the headless Hunt, who mock him cruelly for not being headless enough. This moment exposes Nick's longing, his failed attempts at belonging, and the pettiness that remains even in death. It's one of the most character-rich scenes in the early books and completely removed from the films. Without it, we lose not only the humour, but also the bittersweet ache of a ghost's existence. Moaning. Myrtle does make it into the films, but even her portrayal is clipped and cartoonish. In the books, she's more than a shrill bathroom dweller. She is a victim. She was murdered by the basilisk while hiding in the bathroom after being bullied. Her story is one of vulnerability and neglect. Dumbledore and the professors never truly helped her while she was alive. Her haunting is both literal and metaphorical, a child failed by the adult world. The films touch on this, but with a light hand, more interested in her awkwardness than her tragedy. She is remembered for her crush on Harry, not for the injustice of her death.